Hey again, everybody. Scott Costa, the publisher of TED Magazine. Thanks for joining me for another Distributed with TED Magazine podcast again, both audio and video. We're doing both again. Got a chance to talk to Mark McGready. Mark's a great guy, and we have some interesting news about him. He's going to join NAED on sort of a half-time basis. He has a new role. He's going to be the Director of Data Insights with NAED. You're getting a ton of data. We already know it, whether it's PAR, whether it's market data, whether it's the economic outlook, just everything that NAED is doing and all the data that you're getting from so many different sources. And it's not about getting data, it's really about analyzing data. And Mark is the best at it. I don't care what anybody says. He's really excellent when it comes to analyzing data. And he wants to do some things, maybe get together like a group of data analytics people where you work, and kind of share some best practices and share some ways that we can be analyzing data better to make sure that we're moving into the future. We also talked in this podcast about second quarter of 2021 and what we should be comparing it to. You know, a year ago at this time, we were filling out PPP forms, we were hoarding toilet paper, and this year we're trying to move forward. So it's like the data that we have this year, what are we benchmarking it against? Are we benchmarking it against 2020, or should we be looking at other years? And that data that we have from last year, what's its value? So we just had a great conversation. I really enjoyed talking to the guy. Not going to make you wait any longer. Here it is, my podcast with Mark McGready. All right, I think I get to be the first to publicly welcome Mark McGready to NAED. For those who don't know, he's joining the association, going to do some stuff. His official title, Director of Data Insights. I'm excited to have you. You're a frequent guest on the podcast. We talk at conferences all the time. I'm excited to call you a coworker now.
Yeah.
Welcome to NAED.
Yeah, thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. So tell me, get into it. I'm not going to define your role for it. I'll let you kind of define it, but tell me what the Director of Data Insights is going to be doing with NAED and how our members are going to benefit from you being a part of the association.
Yeah, I've never met a Director of Data Insights before, so I'm going to have to try and figure that out. Essentially, I've spent a lot of time working with organizations, talking about the benefits of analyzing data. Saying that the roadmap to success and the roadmap to fixing some of the problems that are inherent in your organization lies within just examining the data in the right way. And that's probably the key phrase that needs to be added to that. It's a lot of people have information overload today. It's not as if you don't have all the reports that you need at the moment, but a report is worthless if you don't know what to do with it. If it's just noise at that point. It's like 90% of the content on ESPN is just numbers that they throw at you that don't really mean anything. And we all suffer from that kind of thing as well, because everybody loves a report. It's you can look at a number and know what it means. I guess the translation that I'm trying to deliver is how to convert all of this noise into intelligence and actionable information, how to interpret what this means, what things to look at, what things to ignore, and where the canaries in the coal mine are for a lot of the data that you have, but also then where a lot of the opportunities are. And what I have found in the past is generally when things are good and business is running on rails, there's not a lot of attention that needs to be paid to this kind of a thing because everything's going the way it should. But when you get moments of instability, nobody goes to the doctor until they feel something's a little bit dicky with a ticky. So moments of instability that we've had over the last year, all of a sudden make it, we need to get really better at having the monitors in place for our business. And that's what the data insights is all about.
And we had some moments of instability in 2020, huh? I mean, that pandemic kind of turned things around. Let me talk about that in a second. But first, let me follow up a little bit on what you just mentioned about, again, the amount of data. And again, I think we take for granted, I think, some of the data, again, the amount of data, I should say, that we're getting. Safe to say, give me your opinion on this. What's worse, I guess, would be a better way of phrasing this. What's worse, not taking advantage of the data, or having the data, but not analyzing it properly, and that leads to bad strategy?
That's a kick in the shins and a poke in the eye question, really.
Yeah.
I would say not analyzing it properly is probably the bigger sin. We all know what they say about statistics. You can make numbers tie into whatever belief that you want to have. But there's a truth in numbers too. Ultimately, you can just look at a number and, it'll tell you what's really going on with your business. I think the important thing is you need a lot of inputs to have one output. And I think that's where data analytics has maybe gone wrong in the past. They believe there's a lot of inputs means there's a lot of outputs as well. So I'm going to have 4 or 5 different reports that I expect the sales guy to look at every month. And we hand spreadsheets to people that are not experts in interpreting spreadsheets. And ultimately, what do you do when you get a table with a bunch of numbers in it? You look at where the numbers are small and where the numbers are big, and then you interpret what you want to do. And I feel like culturally we got further in being more comfortable with handling data, but we haven't got far enough in terms of learning that it's not about looking at the numbers, but it's about the end result and the interpretation of all of that information. And if you think about it, Scott, in a lot of ways, the transformation that I'm going to get philosophical for a second, but that humanity and society has gone through in the last generation is out of control. When we were kids, and I'm going to say that we were kids at the same time. Be kind.
If you want to believe that, that's fine. Go ahead. I might have you by a skosh, but go ahead. Yeah.
When we were kids, when we didn't know something, we didn't know something. That was you didn't really have an answer, and so you learned, and that was how you got ahead. You needed to learn. You needed to memorize. That was your marker. Mm-hmm. Now, 10-year-olds walk around with all of human knowledge in their pocket.
Right.
So the information that we have access to, think of like buying a car and what buying a car used to look like compared to what buying a car looks like today. It used to be you would go to a local dealer because there's a good guy who would give you a fair price and you would buy a decent car. Now, if you're not looking at a half dozen different YouTube videos and cars, and if you're not doing a virtual tour, and if you're not checking the listings for the best price, you're not trying. So we're in an information overload society. And that's reflecting every aspect of everything we do, more or less. And that's a natural progression of having all of this technology. What we haven't done is we haven't found a happy medium where you can have access to all of that information, but you don't have to spend all of the time trying to dive into it and figuring out what your interpretation is. You just want to get to the end result. What's the best car for me to drive right now? That's really what we're looking for. Mm-hmm. And that applies across the board, whether we're looking at sales reports or we're looking at operation reports or we're looking at investments that we need to make or marketing initiatives or all of the other daily challenges that the NAED members are looking at. How do we simplify without simplifying? I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah. So we would sit at NAED conferences after, you went to dinner that way and I went to dinner this way. And then we sit at a table next to the bar and try and solve the world's problems. And I know you've said this to me while we were sitting at the table. And then I know we did a podcast. I want to say it was late 2019. It might've been very early in 2020. And you said the same thing, which was we're at the point where companies need to start having chief data officers.
Yes.
The CDO. Seems like now more than ever would be a good time to have a CDO.
COVID is, we will look back when we're all through it and the other side of it, and it'll be a fascinating moment. Because this was a recession that wasn't a recession. Yeah. This was an overnight collapse that we forced upon ourselves to try and keep us safe. But it means it's going to have an overnight recovery again. It's coming. It seems to be coming pretty quick. Depending which news source you get, vaccines will be in everybody's arms by 4th of July. Some people say it'll be Memorial Day. It's coming pretty quick. What I found in 2020 is that most people just kind of sat still and wanted to not move. There's a lot of people sitting in their hands saying, let's just get through this. Because as you and I were joking earlier, you couldn't get toilet paper this time last year.
Yeah, right.
Problem. So I understand why there was a whole lot of, let's just wait. But now there's a lot of pent up attitude to go and do stuff. There's going to be a lot of capital that's going to be released. There's going to be a lot of plans. There's going to be this post-war overwhelming feeling of excitement in terms of investment, in terms of doing new things. And there's a transformation of business which is the most significant transformation of business since the creation of email.
Right.
I mean, email looked like a fad until it became the communication source for everything.
Mhm.
Now working from home and working remote, and this kind of virtual employee is going to be the new norm as well. So with that, I think then it drives, these interesting times drives the need for more advanced analytics and more access to it, because you are in an unstable time period and you need to pay more attention in unstable time periods. I feel so bad for a lot of businesses. A year ago this week, just watch the news and horror and then think, what do I need to do to keep this business operating? Because there's a lot of members who are genuinely saying, we don't do something in 60 days, we might not be here.
Right.
But we didn't know if this was the cliff, or if it was going to get better, if it was going to get worse. We didn't know anything. So without access to data, to be able to say specifically, this is what's happening here, here, and here, like a ship that had an engine display that says, okay, we need to do this and we need to do this. Yeah. I think there has to end up in a lot of panic responses and a lot of panic behaviors that does as much damage as does good. So now we're coming out on the other side. We want to dust ourselves off. We want to take a good look around, a good evaluation of what happened in the last year, and figure out, are we the same company as we were entering into this? Are we a different company now? Yeah. Why are we different? How are we different? And what does that mean? Do we need a different kind of salesperson? Are we serving a different type of customer? Do we need to be starting new relationships? Do we need to be expanding? What are we facing? And so I think there's a need for people to get experts on data analytics and give them positions of real authority in their company. I call them the chief data officer. You can't rely on getting in the car, going to a branch and talking to someone like you used to, because your business is getting too complicated, organizations are getting too large, and there's truth in the data when you look at it in the right way. And so I think every company, and I think a lot of them are, but every company should be developing and recognizing their data analysts, the guys who understand how data works, but also the business works. Treat those guys like gold, put them in positions of responsibility, listen to what they have to say, because a good one of those is going to be your roadmap for the next 10 years. Yeah.
So I want to get in. I wrote down complicated, and then I wrote down simplified. I'm going to get to that in a second, but I want to again follow up initially with the toilet paper comment, because we were talking about, again, a year ago, we were filling out PPP loans and we were hoarding toilet paper, and now we're, so we have data from the second quarter, as we're about to enter the second quarter of 2021. We have data of how we did in the second quarter of 2020. Does that have any value, in terms of, because things were so radically different? In other words, if I'm going to compare, hold on a second. If I'm going to compare my 2021 data for the second quarter, should I be comparing it to 2019 or other years? I mean, yes. What's the value of 2020 to me at this point?
The value of 2020 is to see where you were, but it's not a comparison to where you should be today. You're in a different world today than you were a year ago.
Yeah.
And we all feel that insight that, we're not quite there. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I'm in Chicago and it snowed this morning, so winter is still here. But the sun is coming out, and there'll be a day in May where we don't have to wear face masks and we have our vaccine, and we can eat at a restaurant without feeling bad about it. I can take the kids to a playground and let them play with other kids, and all of a sudden this wonderful world of normalcy will arrive again. Yep. That's not what we had. So comparisons are only relevant whenever they're relevant. And a comparison of 2021 to 2020 is so radically different that they don't really count. Comparing what your business is doing over the next 60 days compared to what they would have done for the same time period in 2019 will be fascinating, because that will let you know you're not the same company coming out of this as you were going in. No one's going to be the same company. So define how you're different or why you're different. And that difference then defines how you structure your business and what you need to do for your business. So to me, there are fundamental decisions that need to be made by most of the members in terms of the other side of COVID and what does our business look like today? And what do we need to be doing? What projects should become priorities? Where should we be investing? Where do we need to hire? What's transformed? Because you have transformed. Nobody's coming out of this as exactly the same company as they were before. Yeah. And define what that transformation is and make sure that you're following through on it. So if you haven't done that and you're thinking, yeah, this is all past, I'm just back to the way I was before. Mm-hmm. Even if you think that you're going to be just the same, everyone else is going to be different. Your customers, are your suppliers are going to be different, and your competition is going to be different. So change is coming in one way or other, and either you embrace that change and plan and develop into it, or the change will be forced upon you. And one is the positive way of approaching this, and the other can be the negative way.
And that kind of brings me to, first of all, again, I think we're a radically different business model too from 2019. Again, you may not have the same, whatever, office expenses. You might not have the same travel expenses that you had 2 years ago, right?
I think the industry, and I don't want to get too radical, but the industry for a long time was a salesman with car keys and off he goes. And that was, and he would, he would figure out his week on Monday morning and he would write up his week on Friday afternoon, and then off he would go for the next week. How does that work when your customers aren't in offices anymore? Are you going to go around to everybody's house and sit in their bedroom and talk about business?
Yeah.
So what does a role look like? Do you need the car keys anymore? What's people's preferred methodology of engaging? Is it electronic, but is it more frequent than it had been before? Right. Do you need to have a look? What's the capacity of customers that you can proactively manage? If you're on the road and it might be 40 accounts that you can proactively manage, to see each of them, once a month kind of a thing. Do you now have to manage 60 accounts or 100 accounts or something when you do it a little bit more remotely? One of my favorite anecdotes, and I do this a lot, so you have to forgive me. I started off in the Schneider Electric sales office in Glasgow, Scotland. And that was my very first job when I joined the organization. And it was, imagine a bunch of Scottish guys who are more sales guys than the normal sales guys. And they would be there on Monday morning, they'd drink the coffee, and then they would disappear. And the office would be a graveyard for the rest of the week, and they would arrive back on Friday afternoon, all over the country, doing what sales guys do. And we would frequently get phone calls into the office from customers or from whoever asking about product, and there was no one there to answer it. We'll put it in the voicemail box, and somebody would pick it up. And I, being the new guy, pointed out, like, if all the sales guys are out on the road and there's nobody here, then aren't these sales calls? Isn't there? So they hated me because when I pointed this out, the office manager decided to make each of them do one office day a week. Oh, torture. I have to sit in the office all day. Wow, woe is me. And in 6 months, the office salesperson was the most productive salesperson in the entire department. Whoever it was on that given day got more business than what everyone was getting on the road. And that was, just having an outside salesperson behaving as an inside salesperson as part of their role. Mm-hmm. And that was what the customers were looking for. So we have to ask these hard questions. I think a lot of businesses have to sit back and say, we have to be different now because everyone is going to be different. What is that difference going to look like? Yeah. What does our workforce need to look like? What kind of person do we need to be hiring? Who's going to fit and who needs to change? And have we asked our customers what their preferred methodology is going to be? So there's a lot of consequences coming out of this. We haven't had these conversations, I think, yet, because we're waiting for the pandemic to pass. But we're going to have these conversations really quickly, and we'll know a lot by the end of this year in terms of what we're going to look like for the next several years. Yeah,
I had a conversation with some friends of mine who are not in electrical distribution, but they're regional salespeople. So they would go into an office and then they would be in say 100 and 150 mile radius of where the office is and go out on sales calls. But the rule was at the end of the day, you had to go back into the office and check in with the salesman, physically return to the office. And I think that's so never going to happen again. I mean, it's just crazy to think that again, some of those operating procedures from 2019 will never happen again. So,
we're lucky, Scott. Remote education hasn't really worked.
Yeah, right. I think we all agree on that, right?
And remote social engagement doesn't feel the same. So we're all going to be going back to restaurants and birthday parties as soon as we can.
Yeah.
But remote business has worked.
Yep.
I think most companies haven't really lost a step, considering they shut down their office and made everyone work out of their bedrooms. And that's really impressive, to think that we were able to shift culturally so quickly and not really lose a step in the ground. And in fact, people are happier, people are more productive, and they're more successful in their roles. So in what I thought would have taken 10 years to do, because I was a big work from home proponent, has happened in 6 months, and it has happened and transitioned successfully. And that's the kind of thing that we want to embrace and support. And it's certainly what people are going to be looking for.
So
2 hours in a car commuting every day.
Right. Again, back to the data again, which you again said was complicated, and we have to figure out ways to simplify it. To make sure that again, our chief data officer that we need to appoint is in on it. NAED provides tons of data, and with your new role, I'm part of that is going to be kind of making sure that folks understand, one, what it is that, making sure that we're doing it properly, obviously in terms of providing data, but then obviously making sure that our members are using it well. So, again, talking about the things that happened last year, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is benchmarking and PAR, or and this new warehouse operations, just in terms of really making sure that whether it's the money you're spending or the money you're making is smartly used. Are you looking at that kind of stuff?
Yes, I mean, PAR is not just a scorecard to see if you're better than the other guys or better than
right.
PAR is a discipline of understanding how to measure a business, and then you can have a PAR report for your business, but you can also have your own PAR report for subdivisions within your business. How do you look sector by sector? How do you look location by location? How do you look sales team by sales team? Part of my goal is to help people think through the consequences of the data that they have access to, how that can derive into actions, but also then how they can be applied throughout their entire organizations, so everyone can become a little bit more fluent in what it means. So whether it's the economic outlook, I mean, the economic outlook report is a kind of fabulous thing that everyone should have. For all the cost of it, you're getting a personalized, peer-reviewed insight to what's happening in your world. And why would you not have that and share that throughout your whole organization, so everyone can say, hey, listen, I said when we come out of this, we need to know what's different. There's one of the tools that tells you exactly what's different. Market share report is the same thing. You're going to be different on the other side. You don't know what everybody else is doing. You only know what you know.
Right.
The market share is there to help you stay up to date on whether you're keeping up with everyone else, or whether you're starting to lose ground with others. And you don't want that thing sneaking up on you. You want to be ahead of that to know. That tells you if you're doing the right things or the wrong things. So market share is kind of one of those bellwethers that will let you know we're working, this is going the right way, or this is not. It used to be you could just rely on sales. I sold a little bit more than last year, so I'm good. Everyone's going to sell a little bit more this year than they sold last year. That's not your measure. It's more the measure of what are you selling and how your sales improving compared to the other guys out there. And for most distributors, they won't know that off the top of their head. And PAR has always been one of my favorite documents. I remember listening to Al Bates talk about PAR and having everyone enraptured. It is a wonderful document in terms of having an understanding on what success looks like. And one of the conversations I had with Tom initially was, I want to help businesses understand what good looks like and what great looks like, and how that applies to them. Because depending on your focus as a distributor, good and great can look very differently from one location to another, or one segment to the other. So how do we help use this benchmark of PAR from a sales performance standpoint, and now, as you say, from an operations standpoint and a warehouse standpoint, to really start evaluating where your business is going right and where your business is going wrong. And it's a very useful thing to have available in this industry, to have that kind of insight and have something that specifically comes back and says, this is where this should be. This is where your margin should be. This is what your labor cost should be. This is where your operations should be. Here is the benchmarks for you, and you can hold yourself against that. Again, to me, that would be, if you're running a business and the only information sources you have are your own information sources, you're a guy who's doing his own medical examination. And you'll just get up every morning, look in the mirror and say, I look great. You need to compare yourself to your peers,
Yeah.
and then you will get a true understanding of yes, I'm in a good place, or I'm not where I should be.
And that's where power and market data come into play. And again, you're going to help to make sure that folks just for clarity's sake, because again, I know you have an accent. Did you just refer to the economic outlook as a can of fabulous?
I don't know what I call it.
I think you did. I'm going to steal that, just so you know. What's that?
It's a fabulous report. I think I called it, but a can of fabulous is a good way of putting it.
That might be, that might be a sales line down the road. That was spectacular.
Marketing.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, listen, Mark, if folks want to contact you, I know now you have a new NAED email address.
Yes.
Now, how can folks get in touch with you?
I'm trying to remember the email address. I think it's McGready@NAED.org. If not, you can post something that says
it is. That's what it is. I just wanted to make you say it. I knew what it was. Yeah. So please get in touch with Mark. If you have questions again about your data or need some assistance or whatever, again, whether it's market data or power or the economic outlook, other things, Mark would be glad to help you out. I'm excited to have you on board.
And one last thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things I want to do, I believe wholeheartedly that there is a generation of market readers out there. There is a generation of people who get excited about data and are sitting nod on their heads about this, saying, yeah, I've been trying to tell people that. Yes, that's exactly what we need to do. Yes, I see it every single day. So I want to try and build up that community within the electrical industry.
Yeah.
Manufacturers and distributors are both welcome. But if we can build up a peer group, reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me an email, talk about some of the things that you're trying to do. We're trying to help our companies. Sometimes we're talking to people who don't understand what we're saying. That happens to me all the time. Nobody knows what I'm talking about. But we're right. And that's one of the messages, that if you're into data and you see data analytics as the future, this isn't rocket science, because you look at other industries that are ahead of us. Keep at it, because you're going to be guiding and running the companies in a few years.
And I would love to know about that. I think it's a great idea. Again, I'm not planting ideas. I'm just planting ideas right now, which would be, a monthly meetup of, again, the data scientists, the data officers. Again, it doesn't have to be incredibly long, but again, if you can create that, like you said, that peer group, and then, they get together at the national every year, they get together, whatever it might happen to be. I think that'd be awesome. Don't you think?
I knew how much I had to create myself. When I was in my manufacturer role, I was doing a lot of the invention. Yeah. I didn't have anyone to bounce ideas off. I didn't have a lot of people who could see what I saw. And I think there's a lot of people out there on their own trying to create this sort of stuff. Having a peer network of people who understand what you're going through, maybe have conquered some of the things that you're trying to conquer, have answers to some of the questions that you have about how to get cleaner data, how to get sales guys to listen, how to get the message across, how to distill things down simply. Right. I think we can learn a lot from each other. So I would really appeal, and I'll be driving this hopefully through the course of my tenure here. Try and get that group of individuals put together, and at least we'll have fun.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea. McGready@NAED.org. Make sure you get in touch with Mark, or he's getting in touch with me. Again, two ways to do that. One, by phone, 314-812-5311. I answer my own phone. I'd love to talk to you. You can chat back and forth, or you can send me an email, scosta, SCOSTA @NAED.org. Ask me questions about this podcast, about any podcast we do, about TED Magazine, the 24 digital editions, the NAED or TEDMag.com or Lighted or e-newsletters. I'd love to hear from folks until we get a chance to talk again. Thanks again, Mark, for joining us. And again, thanks everybody for watching and listening to Distributed with TED Magazine.